Okay, thank you very much, Pete, for the kind invitation to present Dungeons and Dragons, the making of blue infrastructure amphibian friendly. As background, a version of this presentation was delivered by Catherine Watley from Nature Scott and myself to a GB, Great Crested Newts Specialist Forum. It was following that it was suggested that a similar presentation be delivered to yourselves. So, next slide. 1 second. So, starting point. Something that you may or may not be aware of is one of the Article 15 of the Habitats Directive concerns monitoring and prevention of incidental injury or killing. Obviously, we've left Europe, rightly or wrongly, but the habitats regulations, if you like, are still present within the UK. In England and Wales, we go by the 2017 regulations. Regulation 52 concerns the monitoring of incidental capture or killing, or ICK, and Reg 53 concerns the prevention. So what types of activity meet ICK? Well, for example, it could be bats suddenly impacted by the operational phase of turbines, or otters crossing roads. And as we're discussing today, amphibians trap down gulley-pots. So incidental capture and killing. Legislation is designed to monitor and prevent incidental injury or killing of European species, such as Great Crested Newts. Owing to Great Crested Newts being a European protected species, it there becomes material to public decision making. As I think we're all probably aware that gulley-pots represent a 19th century solution to drainage, and this design very much mimics the amphibian fence and pitfall trap that we use for clearing sites of amphibians. Obviously, things like appropriate design and management of SuDS schemes will address the issues raised by the gulley-pot and vertical curbstone. The top picture, where the cursor is, has a common toad in a net. I'm aware of records of 200 toads down individual gulley-pots. Okay, one of the things is NRW and its predecessor, Countryside Council for Wales, is supposedly an evidence-led body. In 1996, I discovered that there was amphibians being caught in this these estate roads right by what is now Stritlas, Havard SSI, or part of Johnstown Newt Site Special Area of Conservation for Great Crested Newts. In 1996, 317 Great Crested Newts, 995 smooth and palmate newts, and 173 common frogs were rescued from these gulley-pots. This graph here shows the monitoring that's been done, the impact on gulley-pots combined with the colonization of fish has resulted in a very significant crash in the population, and it's taken years to get some form of population restoration. And here again, this graph show it's not just crested newts that have been affected; it's all species of amphibian. Okay, yes, there are things you can do to actually treat the symptom, and on this site here, they use two types of ladder to install in the gulley-pot. There's a BHS ladder and an Anchor ladder. I think, you know, these treat the symptom, not the cause. Clearly, SuDS is a way for designing out the gully has to be the preferred future for the future. There are other solutions, for example, designing curbstone, indented curbstones, but the same effect could be just by offsetting the grill from the curbstone. So, as a recap, which I guess everybody's aware. Sustainable urban drainage systems have benefits for water quality, in preventing flooding, helping to actually have aerobic as opposed to anaerobic conditions, so therefore reducing pollution. It does consider, when appropriately designed, nature conservation, and it does provide amenity. SuDS is designed for transporting water, slow down water, and provide storage, and allows water to soak into the ground, evaporate from the surface, and being transpired by vegetation. And for these reasons, SuDS are often considered to be environmentally friendly, causing minimal or no long-term environmental detrimental damage. So as a recap, we've got multiple benefits of SuDS: rainwater demand, flood risk management, climate resilience, benefits for biodiversity, the green and blue space that these features require, provide opportunities for health and recreation, and they can improve the local amenity value of the area, and therefore have some secondary benefits for economy, and obviously benefits for water quality. If we have a look at, if you like, as a recap of different types of SuDS pond: retention ponds, which hold water permanently. Here's an example. Detention ponds, which temporarily hold water. Here's another example. Balancing ponds, and often used to actually as part of what larger networks of SuDS to balance the volume of water and flow rates as it's discharged from the site. And finally, attenuation ponds from this series, and similar to balancing ponds, and again it's managing water, often storing in temporary basins. However, these aren't the only types of feature as part that was used for SuDS schemes. Wetlands can be designed to mimic natural wetlands, and and they're effective for both storing water and for, if you like, cleaning or more purifying the stormwater. Here's an example. You've got bioretention ponds, which is engineered that soils, plants, and mulch to filter and treat stormwater. And rain garden, smaller scale of bioretention areas. Now, there's other things as well that contribute to SuDS schemes. For example, planting trees to help improve air quality and help cool urban environments. You've got swales, channels with shallow gradients to reduce water flow rates and help filter water and help to settle any pollutants that may be present. Soakaways, I guess very similar to swales, provide better infiltration, stormwater attenuation, and groundwater storage. And finally, permeable surfaces, which in my view is particularly applicable to many non-adoptable areas of our within new developments. Okay, SuDS and amphibians. SuDS can be created to manage water in an environmentally friendly way. The creation of swales and ponds, and these can create both valuable habitat for reptiles and amphibians. And researchers show that SuDS can make a difference to local populations of amphibians in the built environment in areas that would otherwise be hostile to these species. Conversely, the traditional system, putting curbstones and gullies in, creates barriers and traps. As highlighted earlier, it's the roadside curb and gulley-pot act as pitfall traps. And as you can see with the data, the numbers can both affect individuals, but also could actually affect local populations. So it's more than just an animal welfare issue. So what are the benefits for such schemes for great crested newts or other amphibians? First of all, creating habitat and habitat connectivity. So they can provide, they can create and link fragmented habitats, allowing amphibian dispersal across suburban environments. By having SuDS, you actually will be reducing mortality. One of the technique when I'm looking for if I'm going on site, I always check gulley-pots to see if anything's been caught. It's a very useful source of information if what's present. And other benefits for amphibians is better water quality. So as SuDS help to filter water before it enters the watercourse. Some other benefits. Reg 41 of the Conservation of Habitat Species regs provides the creation and management of stepping stone and linear features. So there's again is another tick for SuDS of actually delivering conservation measures under statutory legislation. So what are the types of things that we need to think about when we're designing SuDS schemes for amphibians? Consider whether they should be semi or permanent ponds. Certainly, I would advise that if ponds dry up once every couple of years, it's an ideal mechanism for managing potential predators. Basins should include gently sloping, well-vegetated margins, this providing ample layers for egg laying and easy access in and out of the water. As part of your design of your SuDS scheme, do actually think about log piles, rocks, and undisturbed rough grassland to provide overwintering and hibernation sites. And the other things to think about is your routine management and desilting. Think about the timing and to avoid newt breeding and hibernation to minimize disturbance. As we highlighted earlier, SuDS can contribute to GCN amphibian conservation. In certain situations, they may this may be a limitation. There may be specific measures required. For example, great crested newts like some open areas for display. The larvae like open water compared to some of the other amphibian species, which means they're more prone to predation by fish, for example. One of the things that we would say is because of licensing, European protected species licensing, that we would suggest that responsible bodies are involved in in at least advising, if not having a 10-year interest of SuDS features, particularly where there are important amphibian populations. And as I was saying earlier, you may need to consider European protected species license for maintenance, management, and surveillance work. The other things to consider is biosecurity, and that should apply to all types of activity taking place on site, whether it's surveillance, wardening, management, and maintenance. I think one of the things that I haven't seen particularly well documented to date, but things I would hope in the future, is ensuring long-term surveillance, including records management, so we can evidence these features when they're put in, actually having that long-term tangible benefit for species such as amphibians, but also many other species associated with such schemes. If those of you who are actually doing any design of mitigation, NRW policy is that SuDS schemes should be supplementary to GCN Great Crested Newt mitigation packages. They should be supplementary, not actually form core mitigation. This helps to avoid potential management conflicts. Okay, so we've created our site. So what are we going to do now? So the key thing is you'll be managing your grassland and aquatic habitats for the benefits of the species, as well as the functionality as a SuDS scheme. In terms of grassland, you want to have create a structural mosaic that provides humid, invertebrate-rich living foraging areas with dense refuges. Key practices to avoid chemical fertilizers, frequent mowing, ideally late cuts, and retaining connected features like log piles and hedgerows. Some other core principles: ideally maintain a sward height of between 10 and 30 centimeters. Don't cut it too short. If you're grazing or mowing it, so for grazing, go for low stocking densities to avoid excessive trampling and poaching. If mowing, a height of cut, I would always advise a height of cut about 15 centimeters or above. In terms of the amount of, in terms of the timing, late summer and autumn cut is ideal. It gives a chance for any animals to the adults to leave the pond during the spring, early summer, and the larvae, as they metamorphosized during August, early September, to migrate from their ponds to their overwintering land. Avoid the use of pesticides and artificial fertilizers, as they can diminish invertebrate pay base and increase the dominance of aggressive dense grasses. Second. In terms of the grass management, creating diverse interconnected habitat, rank grassland can be particularly helpful to the species. And as flighted earlier, if you can have log piles of rock, that will benefit. What the species is looking is maintaining humid refuges, so consequently avoid heavy machinery whenever practical. Create a mosaic of grassland. To my mind, having a mosaic of long, taller grass, shorter grass is what can give rise to favourable habitats and provides conditions suitable for foraging, humidity, and predator avoidance. Avoid pesticides and fertilizers. And for hibernation, think about rubble or deadwood or brash, which the species will use for overwintering. One of the key things is they shouldn't be too wet and they must be frost-free. All right. I think mowing and grazing, as I was saying, avoid cutting or heavy grazing in early spring and autumn when the newts are migrating to and from ponds. This reinforces the height of cut of about 15 centimeters, and ideally have a rotational approach to mowing and grazing, so that you have patches of tall vegetation, and so the patches of tall vegetation are always available throughout the year. So, how do we protect newts or other amphibians during works? First of all, avoid ploughing. Research shows that a typical area of ideal habitat for the species, grassland habitat, can support something like 250 newts per hectare. You contrast that with ploughed fields where you're talking about 20 newts per square per hectare. So it really shows the impact of ploughing can have on a species that is subterranean. If you are doing works in the vicinity of pond and you actually are having a potential impact on any animals that may be subterranean, you may want to consider destructive searches, so that to avoid any incidental injury or killing. Remember, Great Crested Newts are strictly protected by law, making it an offence to kill, injure, or disturb them, or destroy their habitat. Hence, if you have them on site, do consider potential licensing requirements for habitat creation and management. As an amphibian, Great Crested Newts are not present in water bodies throughout the year. They use land. Typically, the species will use hibernation sites to hibernate from late autumn to early spring. Things I've done in Scotland suggested that you can actually find features that are more colonially used. I've actually found them also in dry stone walls. I found them in cellars, so that they do turn up in the most unusual places. to mimic some of the features where we found them, creating piled logs, rocks, and soil covered with turf. If you've got waste bricks and things, using the vernacular is an ideal use, and creating something that will be functionally used by the species. Do protect things like tree roots, small mammal burrows, and old rubble piles, as these will be used by amphibians. Within your overall scope of works within a site, do leave some areas unmanaged, such as rough grassland, because these again will be used as corridors by amphibians for dispersal purposes. So we've talked about grassland management, and we probably, having seen those pictures earlier of different types of SuDS system, there's things that we could do to enhance the grassland element. Now going on to look at pond and water management. The key is to maintain fish-free, unshaded ponds with abundant cover for vegetation for egg laying and good terrestrial cover. To help maintain fish-free ponds, it is worth considering ponds drying out once every 3 to 4 years. Again, owing to the crested newts being legally protected, you should aim to do aquatic management during the autumn winter. And when you're planning your works, do consider working areas and try to minimize damage to surrounding habitats. Effective pond management and creation requires a few key practices to ensure a thriving, stable population. Shading. Ponds aim to receive should receive between 60-70% of the surface from sunlight. So prune overhanging trees and scrub to prevent excessive leaf drop and shading. The impacts of this will be to lower oxygen levels and speeds up successional rates by ponds turning into a bog. Egg laying plants, GCN typically lay their eggs singly on species such as Calitrichae or Potamogetons, and they lay each of their eggs singly and then wrap the vegetation around the leaves. Where there are no aquatic vegetation, I have seen crested newts lay their eggs on rocks or even crisp buckets. Okay, silt and dredging. A lot of the textbooks in terms of pond management tend to think of a pond as a single entity. Particularly if you're creating pondscapes in higher pond density areas, you could take a more pragmatic approach. To my mind, effective management will be to actually create a range of cereal conditions within your pond cluster. However, this isn't applicable. This isn't always applicable where you do it where your SuDS or other ponds are present in low pond density areas. In which case, the textbook approach of managing 1/3 of a pond at any one time to prevent loss of aquatic habitat, as aquatic invertebrate habitats, and preserve egg-laying substrates. I've had newly created ponds, and within 2 years, you had almost like 90 to 100% cover with Typha. So, where in the high pond density landscapes, species like Typha, greater reed mace, I would argue that as control as much of that as possible in any one pond, given how aggressive it can grow in an aquatic environment. In terms of any material that you dredge out from your ponds, never deposit silt or vegetation in areas that the newts could use for terrestrial foraging or for overwintering. In terms of fish and water quality, fish, whether herbivorous or carnivorous, can have an impact on crested newts. I showed you the slide. Sometimes. I showed you the slides of Stritlas. And one of the impacts of why the population decline was the consequence of fish. It took us 9 years of fish control to be able to actually show the water body was fish free. Following the fish free nature and in combination with the amphibian ladders, the population has started to recover. In terms of water quality, Great Crested Newts prefer more neutral pH, although I've seen them in some calcareous areas. Acid ponds tend to have more populations at suboptimal levels. In terms of agricultural runoff, these should be ideally avoided from direct water inputs from polluted streams or ditches, as these can introduce excessive nutrients. They also, or if you've got direct water inputs, can also be a source of fish. So I'd like to say that provides the, if you like, the whistle-stop tour on amphibians and SuDS. I'd like to thank Catherine Watley from Nature Scott, who provided a lot of the material. Nature Scott has done has been looking at the design of SuDS schemes for amphibians. As I understand it, will be producing updated guidance on how to manage SuDS schemes that benefits amphibians. Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks, Matt. That was a tour de force. If you'd like to stop sharing your screen, we've already got one point which has been raised in the chat. So, Jill, could you unmute yourself and turn on your camera if that's okay, and make your point?
I'm attempting to. Yes. Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
Really good presentation and really good to raise the points because, as you know, we've been trying to do this for years. But I think the terminology we use often as environmentalists, we sometimes, because I've for ages used to use the words gulley-pot, but gulley-pots and catch pits are considered very different by drainage people. And we sometimes need to, although you're really good doing the different pond types, we need to get clear that we all use the terminology used by engineers. So a recent example where on the Carnarvon bypass, I made a request from the very beginning that we had it as amphibian-friendly drainage, and we had used SuDS, and we had lots of assurances it was a SuDS design with vegetated swales and balancing ponds, but lo and behold, only when walking through it, actually with your counterpart Pete Evans, we found that there was a series of open grids at the end, all the way through following the vegetated swales. So we said amphibians are going to fall into these. They're just acting as another pitfall trap. We had problems being able to counter the argument because they said this is a SuDS design, and we said, well, they're going to fall in. In the end, they obviously do. They did fall in. They said, oh, they'll get washed through to the balancing pond, but that's not true. We were getting animals trapped. So catch pits are actually even more problematic to retrofit with any ladders. They're usually much, much deeper. They've got these horrible big overhangs. So just we need to learn as an industry ourselves how other industries work and
Yes.
the terminology used, because otherwise we always seem to be at odds, because I thought, wow, yes, we're going to get something different here, and actually got it probably worse, which is depressing. So yeah, it was just a point of just for us as environmentalists to be aware of terminology and the pitfalls of the problems that.
Well, I think you're right. It's any gully, particularly where there's an overhang. That's what we need to avoid.
Yeah.
And I think this is the reason why I thought it was quite useful to go through different types of the terminology of different components of SuDS. And you know, we could probably do, you know, for each one of those slides, you could probably do how you could actually enhance that particular side for amphibians and identify any features that we would like to see designed out because of risks of capture.
Yeah, so I suppose my main point was it's not all gully pots, and gully pots are just one aspect, and catch pits are possibly worse. And we as an industry tend to use them as a catch-all of gully pots, and they're not. And I suppose what you had the other question, you mentioned herbicides. Within the roads, there's this horrible practice of spraying herbicide, usually glyphosate, over French drains to keep the vegetation off the top, which really bothers me. And I have failed to find any studies that have shown the argument that glyphosate, if it filters through and you've got amphibians amongst the filter grain substrate, what damage it's might do to them. I assume quite a lot, but I wondered if you're aware of any studies that have shown the impact of herbicide on amphibians on their skin or whatever.
I thought I'd read something about impact on glyphosate and amphibians, but I could be wrong. I'd need to check and come back to you.
So if you do come across something, it'd be very useful, because it is something that would be really nice for have a change of practice. But again, often people want evidence. Sorry, Pete.
I think
this
is the reason why I thought that work at SuDS over so many years, funded by our Section 15 programs, ironically, it was has given us a very good evidence base of the impacts of just one very small series. Stay down, my phone's going. To my mind, if you multiplied how many gulley-pots are present in the UK, and then you overlaid that where amphibian populations are known, that ought to give some indicator of how significant the issues are.
Yeah,
and I think it's the other point is, I don't think that at the moment Welsh Government has been formally notified of risks to ICK. And that's something that I would hope that the agents, the all relevant bodies across GB do now.
I think in Welsh Government we certainly are aware on the environmental side of the risks, and quite a lot of effort is made. But say major road schemes and contractors, and what the promises are and what actually happens is a different matter. And having that scrutiny, and that also comes from pressure from NRW, I suppose, because that's the problem we have.
At the moment, I've not actually seen an NRW or previously CCW report on ICK on European protected species, for example. Whether that, I think that's an interesting point. I'm not sure whether it's something Welsh Government should be asking for it, or we should just be just applying it on an ad hoc basis.